Welcome to an introduction to economics brought to you by Parkbench Tutors and narrated by David Hopcroft. For further information on Parkbench Tutors, please visit parkbenchtutors.com. This short podcast is the third in the series on firms. In the previous podcasts on the firm, we considered a model that operated in perfect competition and with the objective of profit maximization. In this podcast, we shall consider the other end of the spectrum, where a single firm dominates the market, a monopoly situation, and then go on to consider what happens when a small number of firms dominate, an oligopoly, for the final podcast on firms. We shall start with a definition of a monopolist. For this podcast, we consider a monopolist as a firm that is a single supplier of goods or services for which there is no close substitute. What is meant by a close substitute? If there are only a single supplier of gasoline, then there is no close substitute unless you change the vehicle that you operate so that you've got one that runs on another fuel. However, if your home has gas and electricity, then you could switch between these as a source of heating, so gas and electricity can be substitutes for heating. Low elasticity simply means that if the price of the goods supplied by the monopoly is raised, it will have no real effect on the price of other goods. Although, in theory, a monopoly suggests that 100% of the market is supplied by one firm, this is not the case in terms of government legislation in the United Kingdom. If the firm has, or would gain as a result of a merger, 25% or more of the market, then it is considered a monopoly position and is regulated to some extent by the Monopolies Commission. A monopoly is different from a cartel, where a group of companies or countries come together to fix prices. Many countries, including the United Kingdom, have legislation to prevent the operation of cartels to fix prices. Let us start with a monopoly. The demand curve for a monopoly is shown. It is a simple curve where the demand increases as the price is reduced. The average revenue is equal to the total revenue divided by the quantity of the goods sold. The total revenue divided by the quantity sold also gives the price of the goods. This means that our demand curve must also be our average revenue curve. A monopoly has to reduce the price of successive units to obtain revenue from further sales. Or in everyday terms, if you want to sell a lot more, then you have to keep reducing the price. The result of this will be that the marginal revenue will be less than the average revenue. This is the situation that we have shown on the revenue curves for a monopoly. The marginal revenue curve for the monopoly is going to be to the left of the average revenue curve. This is where it might seem to get a little complicated. You can see that we have the average revenue and marginal revenue curves on the map. They are both coloured red. We have simply added the marginal cost and average cost curves to the map. Look at where the marginal revenue and the marginal cost lines intersect. The marginal cost line is rising and cuts the marginal revenue line from below. Suppose the monopolist is producing quantity OQ1 at this point, but the price is OP1. The monopolist is making above normal profits. The total revenue is given by the area of the rectangle OP1AQ1. We have shaded this rectangle. The total costs are given by the area of the rectangle OCBQ1. I have shaded this to show it more clearly. Now we can see where the above normal profits are. They are given by the rectangle CP1AB. Again, we have shaded the rectangle to make this easier to see. The marginal cost is Q1E, but the price being charged is Q1A. A monopoly charging this price will not lead to a Pareto suboptimal allocation of resources. Up until the point where marginal cost and average revenue meet, therefore demand, the consumer prefers additional output. So OQW2 maximizes welfare. Demand equals marginal cost. Under perfect competition, we saw that the price should be equal to marginal cost, and this represents Pareto optimality. However, we can see that with a monopoly, the price is being set above the marginal cost, so that the third condition for Pareto optimality, where MRS equals MRT, cannot be met. We need to pause here and understand why the third condition is not met. The third condition was that marginal rate of substitution be equal to marginal rate of transformation. The marginal rate of substitution, Px divided by Py, is equal to Mcx divided by Mcy. Now if x and y are perfectly competitive, then Px equals Mcx and Py equals Mcy. But in a monopoly, Px is always greater than Mcx. So the third condition cannot be satisfied and there is misallocation of resources. If a competitive industry is taken over and becomes a monopoly, then typically output will fall and prices rise. By considering marginal revenue and average revenue, we can have a look at what we shall refer to as welfare loss. In perfect competition, the price and output are OPC and OQC. I have shaded the area to make this easier to follow. The consumer surplus is now represented by the triangle ABPC. What will now happen if the industry becomes a monopoly? To maximize profit, the monopoly produces output OQM at price M, so the consumer surplus falls. We have shown this by shading the triangle ACPM. The monopolist gains a part of the original consumer surplus, the part being shown by the shaded rectangle PCPMCE. This leaves the remaining area of triangle CEB. This represents a net fall in welfare and is referred to as deadweight loss. This is still misleading since it ignores welfare in terms of equity. What are the advantages of a monopoly? The first is that a monopoly can benefit from economies of scale. A new competitor is likely to have a lower output and the entry costs are going to be high, so the newcomer would not be competitive. This alone will put off new firms entering the market. In a few cases, legal monopolies are created, and so new competitors cannot enter the industry. A monopoly may own patents and copyrights that prevent competitors entering the industry. In the case of OPEC, the cartel effectively acts as a monopoly and controls the price of oil since it can control the output. It is often argued that monopolies are not beneficial for the consumer. The quality of services and goods may decline without any competition. There is no real incentive for research and development to improve the product. Consumers cannot shop for the good elsewhere, and so they have reduced choice. Without competition, the costs may rise unnecessarily. It is not all bad news, and there may be circumstances where the consumer might benefit from single ownership. A monopoly can benefit from economies of scale with costs falling sufficiently to allow price to fall and output to rise. PC represents the price where the supply curve is derived from perfect competition. The supply curve represents the sum of all the marginal cost curves from individual firms. Now, economies of scale may mean the monopoly supply curve is that of MCM, which lies below the competitive supply curve. The monopoly may now choose to produce the larger quantity, QM, at the lower price of PM. In theory, a monopoly should be able to devote more resources to research and development, continually improving the product. The evidence is that monopolies do this. No, it's not. The evidence is inconclusive. If a monopoly is operating in several different countries or markets, then the price charged in the different countries may vary. An example of this might be a monopoly in milk marketing, which was once a feature of the United Kingdom, but no more. The price of milk to the housewife was not the price being charged to a maker of cheese or butter. The average revenue and marginal revenue curves are shown for two markets, where the supply in market B represents a larger output at a lower price. The combined marginal revenue curve is given by summing the curves from market A and market B. For maximum profit, the MRA will equal the MRB. If it were not so, then we could increase profit by selling more units in one of the markets. This level of output will be where the marginal revenue meets marginal costs. Note the marginal cost curve is cutting the marginal revenue curve from below. This shows how the output should be divided between the two markets. This is price discrimination, since all consumers are not facing the same price. Clearly, this does not satisfy Pareto optimality. The marginal rate of substitution is not equal for all individuals. Food retailers have a large number of stores with similar ranges of goods. If one retailer raises prices, it would not lose all the customers, so the demand curve is relatively elastic but not perfectly elastic. Food retailers rely to some extent on brand loyalty. For a monopoly, the short-run equilibrium point is where MC cuts MR from below. This is for output Q1, and the monopoly chooses to sell at price P1. The above normal profits are now represented by the area of the rectangle CP1AB. We have shaded the area for clarity. To retain or increase above normal profits, the monopoly has to increase demand, so advertising is widely used, along with changes in packaging and other ideas. How about the long run? If above normal profits are being generated, then there is an incentive for new firms to join the industry. This will shift the demand curve until the above normal profit is eliminated, at which point there is no incentive for new firms to enter the industry. Mapping this, we can see that the demand curve has now shifted. The above normal profit is now eliminated. The quantity produced, Q1, is still determined from where the marginal cost curve cuts the marginal revenue curve from below. Average revenue and average costs are also equal. Note the LRAC meets AR at a tangent, so normal profit is obtained. Before we leave monopolies, we should say a little about welfare. We know that monopolies do not lead to optimal allocation of resources, and that the consumer is paying a higher price than they would in normal competition. The idea that the monopoly could achieve a lower cost by increasing output is called the excess capacity theorem. The excess capacity of production, through charging higher prices, is wasteful. This ends our third podcast on firms, brought to you by Parkbench Tutors and narrated by David Hopcroft. Thank you for watching and for listening. We wish you success in your studies. For more information on Parkbench Tutors, please visit parkbenchtutors.com.